Thanks for the invitation. Very happy to chat. I have to say I'm learning a lot here about heat pumps and the solar. Um, so I suppose I'm just thinking, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of people who are listening in. We have a house, Offaly Road, Cabra East. It was completely freezing when we bought it. It was a G energy rating. It had no work done to it effectively over the past 40, 50 years. These houses are 1930s built, poured concrete. And because ours is an end of terrace, it was particularly cold and damp as well. So we did a lot of work. We retrofitted the entire house. I'll focus in on the insulation. We basically redid everything and also built an extension. The energy rating now is a C1 that I got. So it's a C, went from a G to a C1. Now I would have likened to get it to a B3, and that's my and a bit higher, not least because the mortgage interest rates now specify if you're a B3 and above, you get a better interest rate. So none of that was in place when we did this back in 2017. And also, I must admit, I was less aware and had less knowledge 5 years ago about this whole process than I do now 5 years later. I think something has changed in the past couple of years. I think general knowledge and awareness about energy efficiency and the importance of it has increased. And I think people are much more sensitive to it, particularly for the cost and so on. So I have some advice at the end of what I'm going to say for people to really consider, should they go down a path of getting one of these houses, or if they have one, completely retrofitting it. So the starting point, I mean, my thinking from the very beginning was this is a G energy rated building. I want to be warm all the time, and I don't want to spend much money during the year. I had lived in various European countries, but grew up in Ireland and grew up in cold Irish houses, and I never wanted to have that experience again. So the question then was, how do you get a house like this that was built in the 1930s up to what I considered to be a normal kind of European standard? We had a builder who basically did all the contracting work for us. And that's the first question I think people need to consider. If they do retrofit a house, they have to say, look, it's a lot easier to do the external insulation, to do the heat pumps, to do all that sort of stuff, if you're basically ripping everything out and starting again. So we made the decision to basically not be in the house, hand it over to the builder, who basically did everything in, say, 3 months. And we did all the plumbing, all the electrics, and so forth, new kitchen, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of the actual energy rating, I think there's kind of key issues to be considered. We went for external wall insulation, EWI, and there are grants available for this. The external insulation we have is 5 inches, 125 millimeter, right around the entire house. So every external wall in this house has 5 inches of this polythyrene. I apologize to our earlier speaker who didn't like this for ecological reasons, something I was not aware of, but I can imagine it's not exactly biodegradable. But that's what we went for. That was the kind of standard thing to use. And then in the attic, we have about 150 mil of foam spray. So we did the attic, insulated the attic, and we also did the external insulation, all the external walls of the polystyrene slabs. But we also put in triple glazed windows. So we have the triple glazed windows, we have the external wall insulation, 5 inches, we have the foam spray in the attic. And in the extension that we built, we also put underfloor heating in. So the underfloor heating, as was just mentioned, really is fantastic. This is the part of the house that we spend most of the time because it's the most comfortable. But the rest of the house, we put new floors in. And I think in hindsight, I would have put better insulation into the underfloor timber that we put into the house, because you can really feel the difference in the different parts of the house. So external wall insulation, attic insulation, spray foam, plus the triple glazed windows, polystyrene flab, underfloor heating. So in terms of the cost, right? And I'm conscious that this is being recorded, but this is what's going to happen to a lot of people. They're going to talk to a builder if they're getting their house, renovated. And the builder is going to say to them, listen, we'll do all that stuff for you, the external insulation, all that kind of stuff. We'll do it at a better price. And we'll do it at a better price because we're not listed with the SEAI. Now, the challenge, therefore, the trade-off for you is whether you go with us and we give you the better price, or you go with the SAI and you go through the process of getting the grant and the subsidy, etc. And then it's up to the person themselves which they choose. But I think a lot of people may have had that experience who are listening in this call, but it's likely to happen to a lot of people when they speak to different builders. So our experience was that, and we spoke to different people, all of them kind of came down to the same thing. Those who were listed with the SEAI said, we're going to charge you 17,000 for this, and you're going to get 7,000 back from the grant. Those who are not listed with the SEAI basically said, we'll do it for 10,000 and you don't have to apply for the grant. Right. So I'm not sure if the SEI is aware that this is happening, because the job of putting in a lot of this insulation, from what I can see, is pretty straightforward. Right. And therefore, most people who are builders, who have a lot of experience of this, will do it. And again, it's up to people to whether they want to go down that path. But that's just being honest. I think that's, people need to be aware of that. But all in all, no matter what way you go, whether you go down the kind of the grant, the official SEI route, you're going to spend about 10,000 there or thereabouts for a standard end of or mid terrace. It will be less for an apartment. It will be higher again for a big house. So it's not cheap. That's the thing. It's quite expensive. But what I would say is that the cost of your energy bills will drop quite significantly, and depends on how you want to think about it over time. If you have a mortgage, obviously, and you're going to improve your energy rating, you can get a better interest rate. So you're going to save a lot of money on that. That's one way to think about the cost efficiency aspect of it. And the other aspect then is the cost efficiency of ultimately bringing down your energy bills. I calculated, and just before coming into this meeting, that we spend on average, even during the winter months, about €3 a day on heating, which is about €90 a month, about 180 over 2 months. But then we don't have the heating on at all, for example, from May to about September. So we don't turn the heating on in a 1930s built Cabra house from May to September. We turn it on then come September and towards the end of September, and we spend about €3 on average a day. So I think that's a pretty good cost saving if you calculate it and you kind of compound it out over time, depending on how long you're going to be in the house for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. If you plan to be here for the rest of your life, that's absolutely worth the cost saving. So that's something to consider. Now, a couple of mistakes we made, or not mistakes, but if anybody's thinking about getting the external insulation, which I highly recommend because the comfort benefit alone is massive. Or of course, you can think about it in pure economic terms as an investment in the house and increasing the value of the house and getting a better interest rate because you're improving your energy rating. So it's kind of for me, it's never perceived as a cost. It's really an investment. But there are certain things to be aware of that we were not aware of, particularly for anybody who's listening in who has a house in Cabra. When you go up to your bedroom in the houses in Cabra, you might notice that the ceiling kind of dips a bit like this. I probably should have brought the camera up. So we insulated the attic and we insulated all the external arrangements of the house. It was only after the complete works were done that I realized that there's a section of the roof in these houses that is not in the attic per se. It kind of comes off the attic. And that part is not insulated in our house. Now, I think if we had, I think we probably could figure a way to insulate that part of the house in the bedrooms, but I'm pretty sure that would bring us to a C1 to a B3, because there is a lot of energy being lost through that strip of, and it's so obvious when you look at it, you don't think about it, but when you're in the attic, you don't see it, and you're insulating the attic, and you think you've covered everything, but actually there's a strip that actually goes directly out. So that's just something to be aware of, small things like this. The other thing to be aware of, and I think a couple of people have mentioned it earlier on as well, is ventilation. We're so insulated now that we need to improve the ventilation. We have vents in every room. Our builder put in vents, and I'm going to follow up with some people here who have talked about ventilation to see what they have done. We have vents in each room because the house is so well insulated. I feel there's not enough air getting through the house. We have to open the windows quite often to really kind of air out the house. So that's something to consider. You know, when you really do this type of ventilation. Or when you really do this type of insulation and you make your house super cozy and super warm, you kind of forget, actually, we need to have a lot of fresh air running through the house. And the kind of typical vents that builders would put in are these classic, you just pull it over. So it's something to consider. I plan to kind of replace the vents and get something better to improve the quality of the air running through the house. I know there's probably some people who I'm going to finish up on this, Brian, if that's okay. We also put a wood burning stove in because I noticed a couple of people mentioned it in the Q&A. We actually don't use it that much. When it's on, we don't ever have to put the heating on, but I know there's all sorts of ecological issues around burning dry wood, etc. But that's what we did. We put that in place. So yeah, I mean, that would be my main advice in terms of the ventilation, being aware of the cost. But anybody who lives in Cabra, very happy for you to contact people here. I'm very happy to pass on my email. Very happy for people to kind of come and see the house if they're thinking about getting something done. Very happy to advise and very happy to put people in touch and they can kind of have an experience themselves, because I think a lot of this really is about practical, tangible experience. And after you go through the process, you know a lot more than when you do it at the beginning. But yeah, I think it's certainly worth it.
Super. That's great. Thanks, Aidan.